Hello and welcome back to part 2 of our Death Card Centre talk. Now we have our second presentation of the evening, Cormac Leonard, who's going to present on the topic of workout. So please welcome Mr. Leonard. Hello everyone. Thank you very much for coming this evening. I'd like to say a massive thank you to Rachel, a very interesting presentation, so well done on that. Oh, sorry, she wasn't looking. I was just saying hello and thanks very much to Rachel for your interest in the presentation. It was great. So now I'm going to speak about a burden on the race. A burden on the race is the topic of the presentation. So that is really a phrase in relation to the fact that when people were having to pay out for the fact that people were deaf. But I suppose I'm going to delve into the issue now and you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay. So I'm going to talk about, at the moment I'm studying my PhD, which is covering various different areas. And tonight, the workout is just one area which I've picked out. So there's many other areas that I am researching as well. But my PhD is based on 1816 to 1924 as a period. But tonight, for the workout presentation, I'm just working from 1838 onwards, because before that, there was no workout in Ireland. There was no workout system, so I'm just working from the established period. And also, tonight I won't really be talking about, well, I know that some of you may be aware that workhouses had a board of guardians, and they were the ones responsible that if a person was in dire straits, that they would pay them, and they would pay deaf people to go to school and that kind of thing. But I'm not actually going to speak about that aspect of tonight because of time constraints. So my presentation is going to be very focused tonight on deaf people actually in workhouses. So what it was like, what was their experience like in those awful conditions and various things like that. Okay, this is one more. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I thought there was one more aspect of that slide. That's great. Okay, so as you can see here, these are the various sources for my information, various libraries and archives that I use. But the main three I do refer to would be newspapers. So most of my information comes from newspapers. It's such a rich source of information about workhouses, board of guardians, different meetings, what was said, documented, whether they were so it was actually very well documented. Sometimes it would be quite positive, things like deaf people mentioned, and sometimes quite negative. But the Workhouse Board of Guardians would also keep a minute book, and that's in the archives, and there's plenty of rich resources in that. Now, I don't use that much. I find it a bit dry, to be honest, and there's very little information available in those. And sometimes it is useful, and the odd time I would use it. But also, if a person is actually going into a workhouse, they will actually record the details of the person in their own record book as well. And that was called the Indoor Relief Register. So I would also use that a lot for my references. And that's a fantastic source of information. There's a lot of detailed information documented in that. And now a lot of those record books, unfortunately, have disappeared over time across the country. But the one in Dublin still remains, and some of the workouts from Cork still have them. In the north, they have retained a lot of that information as well. But unfortunately, some of the other workouts have lost that information, or some of the information has been lost. So possibly you're actually wondering what a workhouse is in the first instance. In Ireland, it was established at a much later time than in England. In England, it had been running for a long time. But previous to it, workhouse being established in Ireland, we used a different system. There was no set structure that was the same across the country. everyone kind of did their own thing. And then in 1838, the new law was passed to set up this kind of workhouse system in Ireland. So a workhouse was a specific building where a family or a person was in dire straits, extremely poor and financially hard up. They could go into this workhouse and be provided with the regular meals and place to sleep and clean clothes. But they were still awful conditions and awful places to live. They were extremely cold and damp and crowded. It was awful. And at the time, it wasn't possible for people to get outdoor relief where they were actually paid social welfare or anything like that. The only option was to go into the workhouse rather than stay at home and get and get any financial support. So their only option was to go into the workhouse. So for the entire country of Ireland, the new law, once it was passed in 1838, they set up in total 130 different unions. They were called poor law unions across the country. And each one had its own workhouse. So there's one workhouse for every union. And those unions were run by a committee called the Board of Guardians. And the Guardians would include local people who be well off in the community, well known. Now they do actually have elections. People vote for these committees to be put in place, but they would decide on what the money would be used for and what should be spent on, whether it should be spent in the workhouse and how much should be given to it. And from 1838, when they started building these workhouses, it took a very long time for people to actually avail of the service, and it kind of started dribs and drabs of people actually using workhouses. In Dublin, because it was an extremely poor area, we saw a huge influx initially, but across the country, there might be, it was kind of a gradual increase of people actually attending these and living in these workhouses. And then, of course, we had the Irish famine, which started in 1845. Then from 1846 and 1847, it became worse. Potato blight, of course, decimated crops, and that's when people really started to avail of the workhouses. But before that, it was very easy to control the workhouses because there was such small numbers, but then with a huge influx, it became unmanageable, and they really couldn't cope, and it became a huge issue. So the English Parliament decided to set up more workhouses. So we had an extra 33 votes then to deal with this overcrowding. But it was still too many people, and there was too many rations to be given out, and the conditions became even worse again. So they had decided, like I said before, that they wouldn't offer like a kind of a social welfare payment to stay at home and give a means to people at the time. Then because of this overcrowding workouts, they decided to implement this. People could actually get this kind of payment. So this was people who were crippled or lame, people who were elderly, and also people who were deaf could avail of this social welfare payment. So if people were extremely weak or, I suppose, lame, etc., they were allowed to stay at home and receive a payment, a subsistence payment. I know maybe you've possibly seen this picture before. It's a well-known workout during the famine. This was during famine times when people were begging to get into the workhouse, and there was actually queues to get into the workhouse. So this is where they would open the door, but it wouldn't be free for all to let people in. They would actually question people and see who was deemed worthy to actually enter the workhouse. So that was worse. That was in the worst of times, at 1847, when there were so many people trying to get in. And then from that time, that's when Irish people, I think Irish people have this image then of the workhouse from that time, really. When they think about the workhouse, it was the worst place in the world. They really didn't want to go, but at the time, it was the only option for a lot of people. And then as the numbers decreased over time, when things did improve, people still had that mark of that worst period of time when the conditions were so bad and people still didn't want to avail of these services in the workhouse. Things did gradually get better, but the workhouses did change in structure in their kind of systems as well. So people who went into the workhouse previously were able-bodied, they had no physical disabilities, it was just that they couldn't find a job, they were extremely poor, and that's why they went into the workhouse. But then after the pandemic, you see that kind of demographic fall in numbers and then increase on people who are sick or disabled, blind, deaf, those numbers increased. So you can see a correlation in that. And also the number of homeless vagrants. Those vagrants would often use workhouses across the country, and they would often travel from workhouse to workhouse looking for a place to sleep and get their meals. And they might stay 1 or 2 nights in one workhouse and then decide to move on, leave, and continue their travels until they get to their next workhouse. And over time, the numbers in the workhouse decreased. So when they became so small, they would actually decide to close the workhouse. And then over time, the total number of workhouses gradually declined across the country. So the Board of Guardians the government saw the Board of Guardians were doing such a great job that they would give them extra responsibilities to administer as well. And they would also include public health, like hospitals and lunatic wards within these workhouses as well. So they'd be like a small amount of hospitals within the workhouse itself. So it wasn't just for poor people, it was opened up to the wider public as well who could avail of these services. And a lot of these workhouses eventually became hospitals. It was after Irish independence. Some of the workhouses still remain today in physical buildings. You can still see them today, but now they're used as hospitals. One example is Navan Hospital. I don't know if you're familiar with that hospital in Navan. That was previously a workhouse. And even though the role of the workhouse had changed, like hospitals, the stigma still remained, and that mindset of going into the workhouse. And anyone who has been into a workhouse, you would associate with. One thing that I do want to debunk, I suppose, is the belief that people were forced into the workhouse. That's not true. No one was forced into the workhouse at any stage. It was up to a person's own decision if they wanted to go in. And if you wanted to leave, you could leave at any time. But you have to remember, at that time, workhouses were the last resort for people because there were no other options. They couldn't get a job, they couldn't feed themselves, maybe their family had kicked them out, and they had no other option but go to the workhouse. So maybe option is the wrong word, because no one wanted to go in. This wasn't a choice for people. At the same time, it wasn't, they weren't forced in. I would read some articles and books and they'd say about deaf people in the workhouse, and they said deaf people were sent to the workhouse, but that's not true. At the time, deaf people just had no other choices, that they were left with no option but to go into the workhouse. Maybe their parents had disowned them, they couldn't get a job, they were on the street, so this is their only option. And secondly, I don't know if at home you can see it at the top of the PowerPoint here, but it says less eligibility. So the principle is that if the workhouse was actually too nice, that people would want to go into it. So they tried to make the conditions as bad as possible to, I suppose, deter people from going into it in the first instance. Also meant that they were cheaper to run. If they made it too nice and too attractive, then people would want to go in, because they wanted to keep people away as much as possible. So they were trying to get people out, not people in. So they wanted to keep the costs low. So before you go into a workhouse, you have to do an interview with the Board of Guardians, who will question you, find out about your background, why could you not get a job, where are your family, do you have any money on you at present? If you actually had money on your person, even if it was a small amount of money, you'd be sent away. So you had to prove that you had literally nothing to your name. And after the deliberations, they would decide whether you were allowed into the workhouse or not. And then if you wanted to get out of the workhouse, that's fine, you can leave, but you have to give about 3 hours notice before you can actually leave the building. Now, if you imagine a family left with no options, where the father couldn't get a job and decided to bring the family, the wife and the kids into the workhouse, and they passed the checks of board guardians. Once upon entering the workhouse, they're actually separated. The mother and father are sent to different wings, and the children are sent to a different wing. So families were torn apart, so it was awful. Also, there are strict rules you have to adhere to and obey in the workhouse. They're very hard to discipline. And if you broke a rule, the punishment would be severe. You may be given extra jobs to do, or you could be locked into a room for 24 hours. It's essentially like prison. The food very basic, the environment very cold, very damp. And I know they had wards for the infirmary, but it was a very, very poor standard of hospital. And once you come in, they'd find out about your background of your work, and then they would force you to do that kind of label, whatever your skills were. So this is a picture from London, the workhouse system they had in place over there. And they had many different workhouses in England. And this is one of those from London. It was roughly about 1900. So you can see how they're all like, this is at meal times, and they're all just sitting in rows, eating their food. Now, not every workhouse enforces the same rules. Like some enforce silence while you're eating, and if they caught anyone talking, they would shush you. So I don't know if that was the case in this one. Also, like I said, the men were segregated from the women. So this is a women's meal time. This was 1897. And this is a picture from Ireland. You can't see it, it's Cavan and Baber. It was just at the end of the 19th century. So this was the dormitories. All the several beds in one room. This is another dormitory. You can see the beds are extremely close together. There's not much leg room. It's very tight for space. And this would be the lunatic asylum. So I know nowadays you say it's the mental health award, but it was an awful term they used at the time, was a lunatic asylum. So, and if anyone had any kind of impairment or disability, they'd be branded as an idiot or an imbecile, and they would all be thrown together as well. So this is an example from that award. So as the years progressed and Ireland became independent from England, the workhouse system came to an end over in England, but in Ireland it continued up until the 1940s. And then it was replaced with, in Northern Ireland it continued to the 1940s, and then it was replaced with the NHS. In England, I think it came to an end in 1928, but in Ireland, once we became independent, we closed the workhouse immediately. I suppose it was because of the fact that it was forced on us as a British law. So the Republic of Ireland just demolished a lot of the buildings, and the IRA actually bombed a lot of those buildings as well to destroy any remnants of them. This one is the Glenties in Donegal, where the bulldozer demolished any remnants of it. So in relation to deaf people, there was 4 ways that these workhouses affected the deaf community. There was funding for deaf education. There was outdoor relief, so if a person was poor but didn't actually go into the workhouse, they were given subsistence or food, but they didn't actually have to enter the workhouse. There was deaf people as ratepayers, so themselves subsidising the workhouses for other people to enter them. Because anyone who owned land paid a 4 rate tax. So anyone who owned land would have to pay those rates as well. So sometimes deaf people weren't on the receiving end of subsistence, but they were contributing to society that would provide these subsistence. And then also there was deaf people who lived in the workhouse. And so in regards to numbers, we can't give exact figures because there's very few statistics and a lot of the figures can be missing, but the census is a good source from 1851 and 63, 51, 61, and 71, and they have exact figures. So the numbers always seemed quite small, like 200, 250, and possibly think, oh, sure, that's nothing, that's not many deaf people at all. But you have to think about the percentage. So if you compare the general population of Ireland and the percentage of people of the hearing population who go into workhouses, as opposed to that would be represented in blue, as opposed to the percentage of deaf people in respect to the overall deaf population of the country, you can see there's a huge increase. So over the space of 3 years, of the 3 years of the census, you can see that there was a much higher chance for you to be in a workout if you're deaf as opposed to hearing. So here you can see it's a 5 or 6 times more chance of being in the workout if you're deaf. I know the number itself in the workhouse seems small, but if you look at the statistics as opposed to the wider general population, then it's a huge number. So the people in the workhouse, you would assume that the reason that they end up there is because they were so poor that they maybe didn't have an education. But the actual percentage of people in the workhouse who are deaf, who have actually completed their education, is shown here. So you probably expect that the percentage who've gone to school would be quite low and would actually decrease over time. Because once deaf people get an education, then of course they have job prospects, they can read and write. They don't need to go to the workplace. But you can see here what happened. The percentage actually increased. So what this really means, I suppose, from my point of view, is that a deaf person had gone to school, had gotten their education. In some ways, it really didn't matter because they were still discriminated afterwards. So they may have been refused to get a job, been rejected on several occasions, even though the fact they maybe were well trained, they were experts in their field, maybe tailors, shoemakers, but they still ended up in the workhouse. And in the 1871 census, we have a lot of information, but it seems from then on, the other censuses that I've researched have less information. Now, the 1901 census you can get online, you can pick out various information, but you can, I kind of put together about 103 deaf people. So it looked like there was about 103 deaf people in workhouses at that time. So the number had decreased, yes, but interestingly enough, within that 103, when you research how many actually had gone to school as opposed to who hadn't, 44.7% versus 53.3%. So nearly half of them had been through their education, but still ended up in the workhouse. Like I said, once you go into the workhouse, you can decide to leave at any time. But you can also return again, and many people did. And this is an example from Tubbercurry in Sligo, from the Board of Guardians meeting. They were discussing about one deaf person who said, I would like you to give me money so I can move. So he said, I want to move to England, so I'm not dependent on you anymore. So the Board of Guardians actually agreed that it was better to give him money to get him away from us so that he wouldn't be back in and out of our workhouse again and again. So they actually paid him to go to England. And then the second example from the North of Ireland in Dungannon. There's a local woman who was very poor in very desolate conditions, but she was living by herself, she had no family, she had no one to look after her. And one staff from the workhouse who was responsible for that outdoor relief, that's the distance thing, were constantly paying her, and he was actually encouraging her to go to the workhouse, but she adamantly refused it. I'm not going anywhere near that thing. And then once he discussed it with the Board of Guardians, saying we should be bringing her in here, they decided, no, actually, we have no power to do that. We can't force anyone into our workhouse. So now I'm going to go through a few stories of deaf people who actually went to workhouses. So this is from various locations across the country. So we have one from Cork, one from Sale here. So this building was actually a former workhouse, and the building has remained. So one deaf called John Riley, who I think he didn't go to St. Joseph's, but he would have went to a deaf school. I don't know where it was, but Claremont, it's not very clear. But in a 10-year period, he was in and out of the workhouse 21 times. So altogether, it came to a total of 404 days. So that's over 1 year living in a workhouse. I know it wasn't continuously, but over going in and out, toing and froing, he spent about 404 days there. An average 19 days each time, and the highest was 93 days in 1855. Sorry, that actual information is a little bit wrong, so I'll move on from that and just explain. Sorry, this man had a deaf sister. So sorry, it wasn't John Riley. It was the William Blow and his sister were sent to the workhouse, but then they were segregated based on gender. So they were from Downpatrick, and they went to the Downpatrick workhouse. And himself, he went to Claremont School. And within a 10-year time frame, he was in 31 times in the workhouse, coming to a total of 248 days. The average stay was 8 days each time. So Northern Ireland is so lucky because they have so many record books still available, and they have archived them. So there's a lot of rich information available if you're based in the north. So this is one example of Becky Beers, who was in Strabane, in the deaf school there. She was Protestant. So it started from 1838 to 1903, and she was in there 27 at the time. Altogether coming to 6,500 days almost, meaning she spent 17 and a half years of her life in workhouse. The average duration of her stay is 238 days, which is a really long time. Sometimes it might just be in 2 or 3 days, other times she'd be in to stay for huge periods of time. And at the time, I have researched and I found out that within the Strabane workhouse, her name occurs and reoccurs several times, but it's the only one as a deaf person. There's no other deaf people in the workhouse at the time. So you could imagine as a deaf person what that must be like. So she had a daughter, we don't know who the father was, but like we say, we see her name several times, and then on one occasion when she's being re-entered into the workhouse, it records the fact that she's pregnant. So she stayed there throughout her pregnancy and gave birth in the workhouse. After that, she'd left again, and it used to be just herself coming into the workhouse, but then it ended up being the two of them coming into the workhouse. It's herself and her daughter, and you can see both of their names recorded. Unfortunately, her daughter died young. She was 5.5 years old when she died. She died in the workhouse. But after that, she still came and went from the workhouse throughout her life, and then she died in 1905. So this picture is from Dublin. Now that building has since been demolished. At the time, there was several buildings in South Dublin. It's like a small village of workhouses. Most of them, unfortunately, have been demolished. Now, some of them still remain, and some of them have become St. James Hospital. So this building before was part of the 1916 Rising. But there's a different kind of history, so I'll stay on track. So he just entered the workhouse one time, but he had stayed a long time. He was Catholic, and he was 67 and a shoemaker, and he would have went to St. Joseph. When I researched St. Joseph's, I couldn't find his name there, so I don't know, possibly he went to Claremont. And then 1886, when he first entered it, he stayed there for 9 years. And he never got a chance to leave. He died there. This is his death certificate, and it documents the fact that he was suffering from dementia. And he had an infirmity. So it just meant he was extremely sick. Right. So this one is a little bit different. This is another person who was in and out. He was a shoemaker, Protestant. But from 1867 until 1886, over that time frame, he was in and out 33 times. Altogether, for a total of over 5,000 days, which is approximately 13 years and 8 or 9 months. One time when he entered, he stayed for 5 months. And the reason for that, which is documented in the book, is that he was in hospital, in Heidelberg Hospital, suffering from a fever in hospital. So it looks like that he was so sick that he went into the workhouse and stayed until he improved, and then left again. And then went back to his old ways of in and out. Most of the time, when people would go in, they would go for short periods, and this fellow was no different. He'd go in for a few days at a time, usually. So this is a deaf woman, Mary Eaton, or Easton. Both names occur, but I know they're actually talking about the same person, because they had gone to get married. She entered the workhouse very young. She was only 20. Now the book mentioned that she had old clothes on her, so quite ragged clothes, and then when she entered, she stayed for a very long time. Altogether, she stayed for almost 24 years of her life, and then she died. It said she died of bronchitis. And this is the last one from South Dublin. And it was a Protestant woman who was quite young entering the workhouse. And previous to that, she was in Providence Home, which was for a home for young Protestant women who were orphaned. And they would train her and educate her, but it looked like that it wasn't working out with her training, and that's when she moved into the workhouse. And there she stayed. She was there for a total of almost 44 years of her life. And when I was looking at these documents, I could see that she left in 1929, but I couldn't believe it, and actually turned out that she did. but it wasn't because she had died. She was actually transferred to an asylum. I'm not sure if it was Grange Gorman. I'm not sure exactly, just as an asylum. So I've tried to find out from her death certificate, but I've never found her death certificate. So 44 years living in workhouse. This is an interesting story about that couple. They were married in 1865. But I'm not sure if from their names they went to Carver or Claremont. But they got married. They had 2 or 3 children. One died very young when they were a baby. So one died when they were a baby. And then in 1871, both of them with their 2 children, so the 4 of them went into the workhouse at separate occasions. It was a different workhouse. It wasn't based in Dublin. It was in Rathdown. Now it'd be Loughlinstown. I think it's St. Colin Hill Hospital. So that was previously workhouse as well. So the whole family at the time went in. And remember, like I said, the women, children, and the fathers would be separated. So every time they went in and out, it's documented. The average was 104 days each time, so it's a very long time to be separated from everyone in your family. And then in 1876, the wife, Julia, went in by herself and died in the workhouse. Then there was no more admittances until 1883, when John, again by himself, went into the workhouse on several other occasions. About 19 times after that, he entered the workhouse. And then he died there in 1893. In total, he spent 11 years of his life in the workhouse. And once the deaf person entered the workhouse, what kind of work would they be given? Well, initially, when you enter, you're given various jobs to do, because, and also people wanted to work because otherwise they'd be sitting around doing nothing. And deaf people who had good trades were often given good jobs, not for pay, of course, but they were still expected to do their bit. And if they knew someone was experienced in a certain area, they would give them jobs linked to that work. In the hospital, in the workhouse, you could actually work as a nurse or a carer, people who were sick in the workhouse. So people with intellectual disabilities would have a carer working with them, looking after them. There was jobs like shoemakers and tailors, and then odd jobs. One interesting newspaper article was documenting a Guardian meeting, and some of the Guardians said, oh, those deaf people are great workers, but others were slagging them saying, geez, they're good for nothing. So you see varying articles and varying descriptions of deaf people's work. At the same time, the deaf people were given very menial tasks that hearing people often didn't want to do. I have 3 examples. One is from Longford, talking about 2 people working in the hospital in a lunatic asylum, and the other one who was a dummy. Both of them were in the workhouse hospital, working with staff and getting paid. So, but they were still being given menial jobs to do. And these kind of jobs were the worst of the worst jobs needed to be done in the workplace. The second example I have is quite a positive one, actually, where it was a different hospital in Ballymoney, where 3 assistants in the hospital and 1 who was deaf, and was a very good worker and very diligent. The document when he never had any children, and he never had any legitimate children outside of marriage. But that meant that the other 2 that were working there did. The fact they mentioned it in the newspaper article. And then the third example is from Clones in London. where the workhouse were appealing to the Board of Guardians for, like this person was appealing to the Board of Guardians to the workhouse for new clothes, and they were discussing and deliberating whether they should or not. And they said, oh, absolutely, they should give him new clothes because he's a very useful man and he always does good work. So there's varying decisions of the kind of reactions the workhouse had to deaf people. But there's often cases as well of people slagging off deaf people and mocking deaf people. So this one is from Strokestown in Roscommon. So where one of the deaf people were saying, I want an extra helping of food. And of course the portions at the time were fixed portions and they'd be quite small rations. And that would be your helping. But one deaf person was appealing for more. And so they were saying, okay, we'll have to discuss it to the board. And they said, oh yeah, that's fine, go on, give him another portion. Because he can't ask for more, like an Oliver Twist. So, because he was deaf, so they're just slagging him, like, you know. The second is from RD. The master had said, oh, they want more staff, want to send one dummy to them to help. Said, oh, they want more staff. I said, I've already sent them one more dummy to help. And he said, oh, sure, a dummy, how can they help? And then they were having a laugh over that. So that just shows the different attitudes towards deaf people can vary depending on where in Ireland the workhouse was, depending on the Board of Guardians themselves and their attitude. So you see varying views. It's very interesting. It's not just the same across the country. It really depended on the workhouse itself. And sometimes deaf people would disregard the rules, and these are a few documented examples of that. This is so this is in relation to two women, a deaf and a hearing woman, who were both in trouble, and they were brought to a special ward, and both of them were rowing and arguing and fighting. And the Board of Guardians were trying to decide what to do with these people. And said, well, what we're going to do with this deaf one? And said, well, if she wants to go, let her go. Like, she can leave the house. And when discussing it, the priest said, so he was like acting in a chaplaincy role, so visiting her, and said, oh no, I know she's short temper and she's a bit mad, so I don't think we can let her leave. And the Guardian was saying, really, is she mad? And he said, well, I don't think so. He was discussing between themselves. And one Guardian said, well, people like that, if they're really mad, then they need to be sent to an asylum. But, like, you know, people were so, like, they can't just throw you into asylum for no reason. They didn't want the asylum to get overcrowded themselves. So they really had to assess whether she was. It says here, if the doctor here says she's sane, she can be removed. Now, this was a workhouse doctor. So, of course, they were under pressure as well to sign her off and say, yeah, no, she's grand. And sometimes they'd, you know, go with that. And then she'd be sent to an asylum. But the asylum sent her back and said, she's fine, she's not mad. So then she was being passed around from pillar to post. So, passed around the houses. This is an example of a deaf man. He was deaf, but he was literate, so he could write and use written communication. But he threatened a man and said, I'm going to kill you all. Or he used this gesture like with a knife across the throat. And then again, they were trying to assess his competency and whether he was insane. And they were saying, no, he's just more stubborn and sulky. And said he'd been brought before the House Session and punished, and he said he's quiet now, and that he had actually appealed to them for begging pardon. So you can see from the records that there's a lot of instances of mental health issues. Now, of course, they weren't documented as such, but we would now grant them mental health issues. There's one from Waterford were a man who had been repeatedly in trouble. And the Board of Guardians felt that he was a very difficult case and didn't know what to do with him, because he definitely wasn't insane. But at the same time, if we let him into civil society, it wouldn't be safe, that he couldn't be left his own devices. But we also realised that jail wouldn't be the right place for him, so we didn't know what to do with him. So from my reading, I realised the only reason that he was acting in this way was because of communication as a deaf man. He was being moved from pillar to post between workhouse, asylum and jail, and he had no form of communication with anyone. And, people would often disregard maybe his attempts at written communication and just focus on speaking. So that was the root of his frustration. And in Fermoy in Cork, there was one example of a deaf man who a few times had been branded as insane and sent to an asylum, but was sent back because the asylum had deemed him as okay and said he was cured. So then anytime there was a problem, they'd send him back to the asylum and then he'd be sent back again. So I'm sure the problem wasn't with the person's mental state. I would say it's the environment contributing to his frustrations. And thirdly, there's one mention of Cabra, of a deaf person who looked like who possibly had learning difficulties, but the word they used at the time was imbecile, so it's an awful term that they did use. But the Board of Guardians decided to send him to an asylum, but at the time, Cabra wanted to send him to asylum, but they refused because they wanted to send him to the deaf school in Cabra, but he was refused admission. But then, I don't know whether it was too busy or that they had tried to educate him and they couldn't, I don't know, but he had no place to go. So the last resort was to go into the workhouse. So they tried and exhausted all available options, and then that was the last and only resort. Just give you a quick example about a communication between a deaf boy who went into the workhouse and the Board of Guardians. So they were using written communication for his interview, and they would write back and forth, and they were impressed with his answers. He had very clear handwriting, and he led into the workhouse. So you can see the quote there on the screen. So this was in Newtown. In Northern Ireland, Newtown area in Northern Ireland. There was a lot of debate amongst the Board of Guardians about religion, Protestantism versus Catholicism, and it was a hot topic at the time. But the way that it affects deaf people was the fact that they ended with no education, no literacy, and they just arrived in the workhouse. And then when they were asked to fill out whether they were Catholic or Protestant, and they couldn't actually communicate to find out information, they documented as Protestant, and then years later the priest said, no, they're not Protestant, they're Catholic. I know their family. And there'd be a lot of debate over this issue. So a deaf woman was brought forward. They were trying to establish how to communicate with her. So they knew a hearing woman who had been with her for years and knew her very well. And they communicated with her and asked her to find out this information. So she was essentially acting as an interpreter, and she found out the details, and she would gesture, and it seemed that the woman wasn't getting through, the woman wasn't understanding this, and it turned out that it didn't work in the end. So the Guardians gave up trying to establish this. So they decided in the end that next Sunday they'd send her to Mass, and then see if she was willing to stay and that kind of thing. So they used that to assess whether she was Catholic or Protestant, or whether she had a religion at all. So often they would use notes to communicate as well, looking back and forth. So this is from Cabra. The Board of Guardians had paid the school in this is Galway, were willing to pay the school in Cabra to educate this deaf person, and then they sent him notes. He sent a note to thank the Board of Guardians for allowing him to go to school, to improve his job prospects, and to attain this education. So the Board of Guardians were very impressed with this, in fact, this man is so grateful, and we're very happy to receive this note from him. So this is slightly different. This deaf man went to school in Claremont, but got in an argument in Boyle, the Boyle Union Guardians. And he said that he wanted to go to their superiors and go to the local union board that he said. So he sent a big letter to their superiors, to the governing board, explaining the fact that he was hard up, that he was deaf, that he was always being discriminated against. He sent this whole long spiel to them. And then 1887, in Navan workhouse, there was a boy who was deaf, and they couldn't communicate with him. They tried written communication, and it didn't work. They tried the two-handed alphabet, and that wasn't working. They knew there was a deaf man living in the workhouse, so they brought him in to see if they could interpret, if the deaf person could interpret. They said, oh yeah, I'll give it a go. Tried signing and various different ways, but nothing seemed to be going through. So it didn't seem to work out. And then there was a person who was working as a porter in the workhouse who said, oh, you can. So then they were given out because they were saying to the deaf man, sure, you can communicate with him, but he said, I can't. And then they ended up grabbing him by the neck, throwing him out, and they all had a great laugh about it. Like I said, the workhouses had an infirmary attached to them, and they were always very popular with people because they were free to access. So people knew if they came into the workhouse, they would be able to avail of the hospitals that were there. So that was often the case. Now I know in 2018, the hospitals are still quite, the health service is still quite bad, but that time it was really bad. So there was a person who was brought to a hospital with a broken leg, a deaf person. They're trying to communicate with them and they couldn't. They don't know what happened and how the break occurred. And the doctors were discussing and said it needs to be amputated, the leg needs to be removed. But they weren't able to communicate with that person. So because they couldn't understand what happened to him, they weren't able to tell him that we're going to cut off your leg. But I suppose there was a small relief in the fact that they couldn't find an appropriate saw in the workhouse to actually administer to amputate the leg. So we don't know if it actually happened at the end, because maybe next week's newspaper I researched to see what actually happened, but I couldn't find it actually didn't happen. So maybe it didn't happen in the end. So this is the last part of my presentation. There's 5 things that I've researched of deaf women, and found that they were extremely vulnerable within the workhouse. I suppose oftentimes people went into the workhouse, they were on their last legs as well, so extremely vulnerable, and were easy targets then for abuse. But for hearing people who were easy targets, at least they could communicate. But for deaf women, they didn't have that option to make a complaint or to tell their side of the story. Whereas hearing people would have, so it was an extra layer of effort for deaf women living in the workhouse. So I had of these 5 women, I think just one was in school, the other 4 had no formal education. And it was impossible for them to tell their side of the story. It was extremely difficult. So each of the 5 women have extremely interesting stories, but I don't have time to go through them all. Myself and Albion Jones are working on this to research more about these 5 women. But interestingly, it doesn't mention it here, but I found one example of a man, a deaf man who was flirting with the matron but even though the man had power in that instance, but the deaf, like usually men have power, but then in this instance it was the woman with the hearing matrix, she was in the position of authority, and the deaf man was the vulnerable one, but they ended up flirting. But anyway, it can work both ways, of course, but just in this instance, there was this argument. That's all for me. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you so much. Thanks, Cormac, for the very interesting presentation. Do we have any questions for Cormac? Any questions? Any questions from the live stream? Yeah, we do. But any questions from the floor first of all? Yeah.
Now, first, what to 100 you research.
Confirm your research.
So,
You showed
names,
the name
from you consent, John Chuck. He to Hanapan, his name 10 of unregistered book. So, he from Hanapan. That's your problem. I don't know.
Any conflict for this? Oh, thank you for that information. That's great. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thanks very much, Cormac, for that interesting presentation. It's very detailed. I'm really interested at the beginning when you're talking about workhouses and people going in and out, the recurring admissions. I never knew that. I always thought once you're in, you're in. So, like, I didn't realize people would come and go. So, I suppose I cannot make a quick judgment based on it, but I suppose I need to do more research myself. But from what you said, if you're going in and out, I would assume that maybe when the winter time it was very cold, people just wanted a warm meal and a place to lay their head. I know the conditions were awful, but it was better than outside in the wintry conditions. And then when summer came, possibly people left and when the work was available. I don't know if that's a possibility. I'm not sure if that's what happened. And secondly, and maybe it looks like, people were on holiday to the workouts, I don't know, or other families were away. Families were going away, they would encourage other people to go to workouts, essentially like a babysitting service. I don't know, of course, it's not fair for me to make a judgment based on this, like just this stuff that's running through my mind, but I wouldn't want to be quick to judge. But thank you very much for your interesting presentation and the details. Interesting perspective, yeah. Just in relation to the seasons of the year, possibly could have been a factor. But I know also people would be working in the labour market and would depend on their seasonal jobs. If it's farm work, sometimes it'd be busy and they'd have plenty of work. Other times, the workload would go down and then they have no option to go into the workout. Or possibly, if just the economy was hitting recession, then that could be a factor as well that would influence people to go into the workout. And then once the economy improved, people would leave again. So I've read a lot of articles and books in relation to the Irish workout situation. And once young people went into the workout, they'd be able to discuss amongst themselves if they were hearing from word of mouth those jobs available, and then would leave. But for deaf people, maybe they weren't getting that same information that the jobs were available out in the public domain. But maybe if there was more than one deaf person together in the workhouse, or if they went in together, or even happened upon each other, and found out, oh, are you a tailor? I heard there's a job for a tailor down the road, you know. So I know it obviously more limited the job prospects and the fact that you'd actually be another deaf person. But that was often how people found out about possible work, potential work. And then when you mentioned about the low class babysitting service, I suppose I know some people would try to offload the children within the workhouse, but like I say, it was very strict on that front. That if you go into the workhouse, or if your children go into the workhouse, you go in with them. You can't just leave your children, and you know, if you broke any of the rules, you'd be brought to court. So at the start, they had extremely rigid laws that you would have to go in as a family and then be separated. You can't just say, oh yeah, the mother can stay out in society and the rest of us will go into the workhouse. That was not possible. But then you see over time the case stock into the families going in as a whole unit are less and less. But sometimes, you know, there were different reasons why people were put into work, didn't work out. Any more questions? Okay. I'd like to, the Deaf Rights Centre and our committee would like to thank Cormac Lynott and Richard Pollard for their fantastic presentation this evening. And we'd like to just send a shout out to all people on Facebook. Apologies for the poor lighting. We don't have a specialised spotlight here, so and because we're on a radio page. So thank you very much for your feedback, and we look into the future. So the quality depends on the quality of the computer we're using on the day, or the laptop and phone we're using, and the size of the screen we cannot adjust because of the logistics. And today we just didn't have the time to implement all your feedback. So hopefully for tomorrow evening we can bring an extra light and the lighting will be better. Safe home to all, and thank you very much for coming.